Good evening from central Bangkok. We have an interview for you today. An interview with a man called Charlie, who had a business in Bangkok, but unfortunately he lost his business, and we'll get into that in the interview. But more than this interview about business, it's also about Charlie's life. He's lived a very interesting life, and you know, when you interview people, everyone has a story, and sometimes you find a story within a story. And there's a man in this interview that we're going to speak about who has passed away in a very famous event. Famous is not the right word. Infamous event that all of you know about. I didn't expect that this was to happen. You know, everyone has a story, and you meet people, and Charlie told me his story, and part of his story is that he has worked with a hero, a true hero. Humbled is the only word I can say. You'll understand it all when you watch the interview. I just want to say it in the introduction. It's a pleasure for me to put Charlie's story on the channel. Anyway, I digress. Let's get into the interview. And if you like this interview, don't forget, like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, share the video, comment, give me a comment. It all helps the channel out, boosts the algorithm, and allows us to keep putting out more content. So, let's get into it. Hi everybody, I'm here with Charlie. Thank you very much, Charlie, for doing this.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
The question I always start off with, where are you from?
Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Lived in New York City most of my life up until about 2005.
Okay, and what did you do for work in New York City before you came to the land of smiles?
Well, directly before coming to Asia, I was in the yoga business, but my profession back in New York City, I was a fireman and a lieutenant in the New York City Fire Department.
And what was that like?
It was the best job in the world. It was like being on a sports team. You know, I got to do something I loved. There were times that I couldn't believe they were paying me for it.
Did you work in Manhattan?
Yes, mostly. For the first 3 years of my career there, I worked in Brooklyn, but I was in a very slow company and I hated it. So I managed, it took me 3 years to get transferred to Midtown Manhattan. Ladder Company 4, the best damn company in the world. That's subjective, but objectively, it's very often the busiest company in the world. And we were good at what we did. I loved it.
What year are we talking here?
I became a firefighter in 1982. January 9th, 1982. It's funny, the dates that stick in your head. And it was January 9th, 7 years later, that I became a lieutenant. I got promoted exactly 7 years later, which is kind of an accomplishment. I'm kind of proud of that. You know, to achieve that rank in that short a period of time is a little something to brag about, I suppose.
I can't interview a firefighter, a New York firefighter, and not ask about September the 11th.
It was a difficult time for all of us. It was a tragic time, not just for the fire department, but for the whole world in many ways. But I learned sometimes to just get lucky. One of the great features of being a firefighter or a fireman in the New York City Fire Department is you can retire after 20 years of active service. And while it was a difficult decision for me, I had a lot to think about before pulling the trigger on this. I finally decided that I had done all I wanted to do in the fire department, and that I was going to retire as soon as retirement was available to me. And that first date of retirement turned out to be September 10th, 2001.
Oh my God.
And the next day, the man who replaced me got killed. Sometimes you just get lucky.
Wow.
So I was on an airplane that morning on my way to Hawaii. We got grounded in Dayton, Ohio, and it took me 3 days to get back to New York, and I went back to work for another couple of months. I didn't even keep track of that. I couldn't even tell you when I retired the second time.
And how did it feel knowing that the guy replaced you died in September the 11th?
That's a tough question. It felt unfair. You know, I used to talk about this, and people would pull out this phrase that I don't like. They would say, "You have survivor's guilt." I didn't have any guilt. I wasn't guilty of anything. But it didn't feel right. I was in the company that I worked for. I was a lieutenant in Engine Company 5 in the East Village of New York. Another, really, really good and busy company where I felt ownership of that company. I had been there. I knew all the men, very personally. And when my brother and I and my girlfriend were taking off on our trip to Hawaii on the morning of September 11th, we actually saw the fire in the Trade Center as we took off. So we knew something really weird was going on there. And when I got back, my company was fortunate in that it only lost 2 men. It lost Lieutenant Mitchell, my replacement, and Manny Del Valle, one of my men. The other 4 guys in the company survived that day. They literally ran out from under falling debris. They're lucky to be alive, but they are. There are other companies, like my old company in Midtown Manhattan. That firehouse, there's 3 companies in the firehouse, lost 13 men. So, we've coming up with only 2 killed was actually a stroke of good luck. How did I feel? I met Lieutenant Mitchell a few days before he took over my spot. I remember giving him my locker. And he was, I was really happy to meet him because he seemed like a really good guy. He seemed like a competent officer. He was really delighted to have my spot and to be in this company, which I said is a busy and aggressive fire company. And he was eager to be a leader amongst that company. And so I was happy that I knew that I was, leaving my responsibilities with somebody who seemed really good at the job and eager to do it. He had 2 girls, twin girls in college, and I remember teasing him about your retirement isn't coming for a while, meaning he's going to have to keep working to, pay for his girls' tuition, that type of thing. And he was killed in my spot. So that felt really unfair that it worked out like that. And I was saying that I was during the aftermath. I would often say, I would rather it had been me. And I stopped saying that when I said it to my older daughter, Christina, and she got angry with me. And she was like, what about us? And it hit me in that moment that was a rather selfish thing to say, in a way, in that I wasn't being cognizant of the people that love me and how much my death would have meant to them. And so I never said that again. But I guess that's how I felt about it. It's been a long time. I've gotten over it.
Can you tell me about Captain Paddy Brown?
Paddy Brown. Paddy Brown was a friend and a mentor, and I miss him a lot. Paddy was a unique individual. Paddy, I met him when he was a lieutenant, an officer in Rescue 1. Rescue 1 is an elite unit in the New York City Fire Department. There are 5 rescue companies, 1 in each borough of the city of New York, and their primary mission is to save other firemen if that's necessary. Now that's rarely necessary, so they do a lot of other stuff as well, but the best firemen are recruited for the rescue companies. And Rescue 1 is like the premier rescue company of the world. I mean, it's in Manhattan. And I worked in very close to Ladder 4, was very close to Rescue 1. So they would often have openings, manpower shortages, and they would detail men from different companies. And whenever there was a need in Rescue 1, if I was working, they would request me, and I would go there and work. So I worked maybe about 12 tours in Rescue 1 in my 3 years in that neighborhood, and very often I would work with Paddy Brown. He was the boss. He was the lieutenant, and he was just an extraordinary guy. I mean, he wouldn't have that job if he wasn't really, really good at what he did. But what stood out with Paddy is he could lead these lunatics. I mean, these firemen are very competitive guys at the top of their game. Their age, their abilities, and what they did. These were like, it would be like coaching top athletes, in a football league or something of that nature. And Paddy could do that and still be approachable, friendly, and charming, and as he did it. Now, don't get me wrong, Paddy was a follow me boys kind of guy. He wasn't one of these kind of leaders. And so he was good, and he was fearless at what he did, but he could manage these lunatics with a smile on his face somehow. It was just amazing. I got promoted to lieutenant, and Paddy got promoted to captain, and we once again wound up in companies that were close to one another. I was in an engine company. company. Paddy was in a ladder company, and that was our sister company. Whenever we would go out on an alarm, we would go together. Engine and ladder worked together, and so Paddy became a mentor to me. If I had somebody that I needed advice from, I would call Paddy, and he would always give me good advice, and he was friendly, and again, not judgmental or anything like that. He was an easy guy for me to get along with. We also had some quirky aspects to our stories that Paddy and I both had together. Number one, we don't drink alcohol, which is a little bit unusual in the fire department. It's a hard drinking crowd of guys, and we both did yoga. Now, back in the 80s and 90s, well, I didn't do it in the 80s either, but back in the 90s, you didn't find firemen doing yoga. It was, we were weightlifting kind of guys. And so that set me apart, and Paddy did it too. So those are the two, quirky aspects of our personalities that Paddy and I had in common. So besides being, a mentor, he became a friend. And Paddy was killed on September 11th, and his last recorded words after an evacuation of the building, firemen included, was ordered. Paddy said, "This is ladder 3, we're going up." And so he didn't listen to that order. He knew there were people up there that needed help, and that's where he went. He gave his life saving others. And now, that doesn't make him stand out. There were hundreds, thousands of other people that day, not only in the fire department, but around the world, around the country at any rate, that did amazing things to help and assist other people. But what's special about Paddy is he's representative of the courage, fortitude, and living from values that people admire most about Paddy. I'm pleased to have known him. He was a good man.
What brought you over here to Thailand?
Yoga. After I wound up in the yoga business, shortly before I retired, I met a girl when a laundry caught fire, and we wound up dating, and she was a yoga teacher. And like most men that go to yoga, we go because our wives or girlfriends make us go, and I was no exception. And I liked it. I had been athletic. I'm still athletic as best I can be at my age. But yoga worked for me. It sang my song, and I got into it, and I wound up teaching it. I owned 2 yoga studios in Massachusetts for 5 years, and I sold them in 2010, and came to Asia on an invitation. I came to Singapore on an invitation. The type of yoga that I teach is Bikram yoga, and it's a fairly well-known style of yoga, and it's hot yoga. It's done in a hot room. It's a 90-minute class, and it's rather distinct in that it's very difficult. But there's a worldwide community of people, or at least there was in that world, in that Bikram yoga world. And so I would meet these people at conventions and things like that. And this woman in Singapore, Diane Lee, opened the world's most expensive yoga studio. I would like to make jokes, but that's probably accurate. She had a spa-like yoga studio that she opened in Singapore and asked me to come and teach for her, and I did, and that's what brought me to Asia. I worked there for 4 years. She went out of business, a testament to how difficult that business is. She grossed $1.2 million a year and still couldn't make a profit. So when she went out of business, I had to leave Singapore because I had no visa for me, but I had fallen in love with Asia. So I checked the Philippines and Vietnam, and I loved the Philippine people, but I didn't like the Philippines. I did like Vietnam and lived in Ho Chi Minh City, and I had a place here in Bangkok at the same time for a few months. But the place I had in Bangkok, a friend of mine would rent it out on Airbnb and manage that for me, and suddenly that was in Lumpini Place over by Ramanai. Yeah. And they suddenly said no more Airbnbs. You couldn't allow that anymore. So I had to make a choice, and I chose Bangkok. And that was almost 6 years ago. It's going on 6 years that I've been here in Bangkok. And I came here and opened a little yoga studio here.
So you opened the yoga studio in Bangkok. What was that like?
Well, one of the things I discovered actually in Vietnam, this same set of circumstances applied to Ho Chi Minh City and Bangkok, is that you can find property at such a low price that you could find a big building that you could live in and still have enough room for a small yoga studio. And so, like I said, I did that in Vietnam for a while, but when I came here, I found a similar building here, a 4-story townhouse near Recamai Road. near the center of town at an affordable price. And so what that kind of did was eliminate the expense of rent for the yoga studio, because I was living there. I was paying rent in the building, but I lived in it. So my yoga studio is on the second floor, and I'm retired. I don't want to work that hard. I only had 4 classes a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. I had 1 class on each day, and it did pretty good. I could fit 17 people in the studio, and I would fill it up very often, and I was humming right along. I was enjoying it. I met a woman who came and started doing the yoga, and she really took to it. She was very good at it. And I wound up hiring her as a manager. She was the Thai face of the business. She's what allowed me to have a business here in Thailand in many aspects. And so she helped run the studio, and she wound up living, her and her family moved into the house that was part of the deal. She had 3 children, and so I paid her to manage the studio, and your family could live here as well. And we did that, and then COVID happened. How many times are you going to hear that story?
Yeah. So did that end everything? The business finished, or? Well,
it was the end of the business, but it was this. I'm still not ready to reopen the yoga studio. Because of the risk involved with contagious stuff. I don't know if I ever will reopen. I probably won't. I think, the time has come to let that part of my life go. But what happened, I came to a really serious decision to make. If you recall, well, you may not recall, you're not American, but when this whole COVID thing started first bubbling up, I guess it was in February or March of 2020, the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, made a very profound announcement. He said, expats living abroad should come home. And he was unequivocal about it. He saw the risk. He says, you should come home or be prepared to shelter in place. So I had this decision to make. Buakaw, my partner, who I did have a personal relationship with as well, but I held her kind of at an arm's length. I had her fixed in my mind more as an employee than a personal relationship, although it was kind of a blend of both, I suppose. And if I had gone back to the States, which I was willing to do, I have family back there, I love the States. I'm not one of these guys that hates their home country. I'm really glad that I was born there. That's why I've had the success in life that I have had, because I was lucky enough to be born in a prosperous country. If I had left Bua, her and her family would have suffered dramatically. And it's like, my family back in the States, they're grown. My daughters have children. I have 4 grandchildren. They have husbands and jobs that they could do remotely. They had no issues with income or they didn't need me. Buakaw and her family did need me. And her 3 children had been living under my roof at that point for 4 years. And they, I was growing quite attached to them. So I made the decision to stay here. And it was a wonderful decision. It turned out to be a wonderful decision. It's enriched my life in ways that I never saw coming.
Was it difficult to set up a business, like, with the legalities of a foreigner owning a business in Thailand?
Yes. And the solution for that, yes, it was difficult. The solution for that was having a Thai partner. And that's what Buakaw was. That's a big part of her value to having that business here. Was I 100% above board, free and clear of legal issues? No. I was stating a lot of issues, but the way I did that was for anybody that asked, it was Buakaw's business.
Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Yes. Here's one of the things. With the yoga business, you could do that. That would be very difficult to do with any other business that had capital value. If you had to buy equipment, if you had property, if you had anything that had capital value, you'd have to really, really trust the person that you did that with. In a yoga business, that's not a problem. I'm the capital value. Other than, mats and towels and a heater and mirrors, I just mentioned all the capital value in that business. So I would be willing to walk away from that.
Can you tell us about the war hero in your Thai family?
I had mentioned before that some remarkable things unfolded after I decided to stay in Bangkok rather than return to the States after the COVID outbreak. Was that I came down one day and Buakaw was talking with her sisters at the table, and I speak a little Thai, but not that much. It was difficult to really understand what they were talking about. But they were so excited that I sat down and extracted from them the information. And I found out that what they were talking about is that the Buakaw's 3 children, their paternal grandmother, who was helping raise them prior to them moving in to my house, she used to watch them when Buakaw went to work. So they were very close with their grandmother. This is their father's father. Me and the whole family have nothing to do with him. I met him once 6 years ago. Seems like a nice guy, but we don't have anything to do with him. And neither do the kids, which made me sad. I've become their father. And his mother just revealed that she had been collecting a $1,000 a month pension from the U.S. government since 1973. It turns out that her husband, Joseph T. Baker, I knew the kid's name was an American name, Baker, but they're Thai, I never thought much of it, and it turns out that their paternal grandfather was a soldier, a staff sergeant, killed in Vietnam in 1973. And his widow, I don't even know her name, but she was collecting a pension from the government, from the U.S. government, for all this time, and she wasn't spending it. She was putting it in the bank. She's getting old now. She's feeling her mortality creeping up on her, and she decided to start giving it away to her grandchildren, and that's why Buakaw was so excited. All of this money, it's this pile of money, a lot of money in Thailand, is now, a big topic to them, which I was happy for. Great, the family got some, there's a lot of grandchildren, so it's not all going to Buakaw's kids. But I don't know where it's going, and I don't care. I'm glad that they have it. What got me is, you had a grandfather that was a soldier killed in Vietnam. Now, I'm 72. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I was in the Army for 6 years. I was 9 years in the military. I spent another 3 years in the Coast Guard. So I never went to Vietnam. I'm not a Vietnam veteran, but I am a U.S. military veteran. And I grew up in that era. So that's a big part of my software, is this, the Vietnam story. And all of a sudden I learned that this guy, it existed, that he is the grandfather of the kids living in my house, treating me like their father. And so I dug into it. Now, I didn't want to go talk to the ex-husband. That doesn't sound like an attractive thing to do. But he had a brother who's a monk, Gary Baker. And Gary Baker has been a monk for 30 years, and Buakaw couldn't wait to go visit him because he's very handsome. And as she said to me, he's in his early 50s now. And she was like, yeah, we'll go see him. And it turns out he is very handsome, and that's because he's that wonderful blend of Asian and American genetics that produce beautiful people very often, and it did in his case. But that wasn't good for him when he was a kid. Being having more white skin than dark skin growing up in schools, as would happen in many places around the world, he was tormented by the Thai kids, and he didn't take any shit. He was a tough kid, and he fought back, and it became a problem for him. So when he was about 18 years old, a local village leader, Puyaban, suggested that he take a year meditating with the monks, and he wound up becoming one. And so yeah, I went to talk to him. Now, he was like 3 years old when his father died, so he didn't have any direct memory of it. But he did talk about the folded flag and the medals that his father's comrades presented to his mom, and she still has that in their Kanchanaburi home as like a memorial to Joseph T. Baker, the war hero. And he told me enough to confirm the story for me. Because I couldn't find Joseph T. Baker on any of the databases of the war dead from the Vietnam War, the American databases, and that's because he was a teenager when he moved to Thailand. His mother was an American Indian, and he moved to Thailand as a teenager and spoke fluent Thai, and so the Army recruited him from Thailand, and that's why he wasn't on the American databases. I suppose. That's a bit of a guess. I also have a suspicion he was involved with clandestine services, because there were enough anecdotes. He had a big Harley motorcycle. He was stationed in Korat, in Camp Friendship in Korat, which was an air base for a lot of the clandestine missions that the CIA and the Special Forces used to send into Myanmar and Cambodia and Laos and North Vietnam. And he had a gated home here in Bangkok, and he used to drive back and forth between here and Korat as a staff sergeant. So there was something special going on there. This is not a normal Army guy setup. He also had pistols, which they exist here, but they're not that prevalent. And he had a gated house with guard dogs. So all of that tells me that this guy very well may have been involved in clandestine services. I don't know that for sure, but it's a good guess. And the big thing is I can't tell you why this happened, but the day that I talked with the monk, I spent over an hour talking with this guy, and something spiritual happened. It was like I suddenly felt this stronger affinity, this stronger love for these 3 children living under my care in my house. I mean, they had been with me at that point for 5 years. Kelly, who is 13 now, was 8 years old, or 7 years old actually, when she moved in with me. And I'm the only father she knows. She has no contact with her real father, which I think is a crying shame, but that's just the facts of it. And knowing that their grandfather was an American war hero changed something for me. And I promised Gary that his nieces and nephew would be cared for and not to worry about them. And I meant it when I said that. It's something shifted, and I have a family. 72 years old, I have a family again, and I'm loving it. It's like a good thing. It's not like an obligation or like I'm being taken advantage of, or I've had those kind. It's like, no, this is my choice. And it's a good one. There's something special that happened inside of all of that for me.
Now, you just mentioned that you're 72. I can't believe that you're 72. You look great for your age.
Do yoga.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of energy. I saw a video where you were walking up a mountain, and I mean, everyone else was tired when they got to the top, and you had a lot of energy. Now, you mentioned you don't drink alcohol. Why do you not drink alcohol, and is that related? I mean, it's obviously due to you're obviously very healthy because you don't drink alcohol, I would suspect, but why do you not drink alcohol?
Well, it's funny, I've often said the fire department would have changed my life even if I had never taken the job. When I was 27 years old, I decided that I wanted to become a fireman, a New York City fireman. And to do that, you had to take a competitive written test, which wasn't that difficult, but it was very competitive. You had to score very high to be considered. Out of 30,000 people that tried for the job, they only hired 2,000 or 3,000. So you had to score really high. What was really difficult was the competitive physical exam. It was a competitive physical exam that you had to take as well, and you had to score very high on that. And I was not really athletic back then. I was like a lot of other guys back in the 60s. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll sounded like a good idea. Now, I wasn't a big abuser or anything like that, but I like my beer, that's for sure. But here I wanted to become a fireman, so I knew I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I started eating right and exercising. I had a friend who was an athlete. He was an Olympic fencer, and he designed a workout deal for me. And nearly a year later, I took the test and I did very well and got the job. Now, I often said even if I never got the job, it would have changed my life because I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking. Also, what happened is once I passed the test, I started drinking again, and I didn't like how it felt. And when my daughter Kerry was born, 43 years ago, I witnessed her being born, and I promised that I was going to give up drinking for her. It's just one of those little epiphanies in life that people talk about, and I did. I gave it up, and it was just as simple as that. And I just never went back. And it's been so long. I have, it's just not part of my life. But again, what else changed is I became athletic. I've been working out since then as well. I discovered yoga at the perfect time as well in 1999, when running swimming, cycling, weightlifting, karate, all these other things that I did was getting a little bit more difficult as I got older, especially karate. You don't want to be doing that in your 50s because milliseconds count, you know, and you get your ass kicked. And that's exactly what was happening. Also, my knees were hurting from the running and my hips and all this. And all of a sudden, I discovered this style of exercise, which I really liked, that cured all of that stuff. So that, you know, brought me in that direction. So yeah, it's not a big secret. Eat well and exercise. It's a simple algorithm.
Do you have any regrets in life?
Oh wow, I didn't see that one coming. Regrets in life, you know, no. Are there things that have occurred in my life that I would do differently if I had to do them over again? Yes, but I don't have any regrets because where I am now, you know, whatever I did back then has got me to where I am now, and I have a great life. So, you know, the ups and downs of life, the mistakes, the things that you might point back to and say, oh, I regret that that happens. And yeah, there are things in my life that I could do that with, but they got me to where I am today. And where I am today is a really good place in life. I'm safe and secure, living a life that I'm enjoying with a lot of people around the world that love me. And it's like, you know, why would I change any of that?
So Charlie, it's an absolute pleasure to tell your story on this channel, and I wish you the best of luck for your future, whatever happens into the future. And I want to give you a big shout out for your channel as well, because Charlie has a channel. I'm going to leave a link in the description. It's called Travels with Charlie Hub.
Correct.
Yeah, and you're around coming up to 800 subscribers?
735, I think, around there somewhere.
Okay, so do me a favor, folks, go over to Charlie's channel, hit the subscription button, get him to 1,000. Let's try and get him to 1,000 subscribers. You have a great channel, you tell great stories, artistic style, and it's real. There's no fakeness about it. I mean, that's why we're doing this interview, because I think you're a real guy. When
I closed the yoga studio, I started shooting videos. It's like a lot of other people, it's a COVID project, and I'm enjoying it. It's a fun thing to do. Yeah,
but I like your stories though. You can tell a story very well. I'm all about a good story, all right? I love a good story.
Yeah.
And when I saw the videos, I was like, oh wow, there's some great stories in here.
Thank you very much.
You tell them very well. And there's a particular one that I really liked was when you were in New York and you were in the firehouse. What do you call it? The firehouse?
Yep.
Yeah. And you were standing, giving the speech, and that was powerful.
That was totally spontaneous. I didn't know they were going to ask me to speak. They just did, and yeah, thank you. That was from the heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell. That's it. It was totally from the heart. Yeah, absolutely. So folks, give me a subscription, hit that subscribe button for me as well, and click that like button. If you got to the very end and you watch all of this, hit that like, and you'll be supporting the channel. And if you have a story as well that you're willing to talk about, I'm all about a good story. Send me your idea on thairishtimes@gmail.com, and let's have a chat, because I'm always interested in a good story. Anyway, Charlie, it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.